The way this worked in the past is that a listing agent and the seller of the property would get together and they would determine how much of the total commissions they were going to use as an incentive to offer a buyer's agent if they brought a buyer to buy that property. Hey guys, it's Rod Moser again. I am a broker owner of a local real estate company here in Salt Lake, and we have been addressing recently the changes in the market that are taking place regarding the new rules with the NAR Settlement, the National Association of Realtors Settlement, and the way things have changed since August 17th in the real estate industry. Today, I want to specifically address a question that we get asked all the time now, and it's usually from sellers where they say, "Hey Rod, does this mean that I'm getting a pay raise now because I'm no longer required to pay a buyer's agent? So instead of allocating a huge chunk of money to go towards that, I don't have to pay that anymore and I'm going to make more money?" Well, the short answer to that question is no, you're probably not. Let's kind of break that down and share with you the reasons why. So the primary difference moving forward after August 17th that we have now as opposed to prior is that the buyer and the buyer's agent are getting together before they're going to look at homes, and they're going to determine the fee that's going to be paid to the buyer's agent independent of the houses that they're looking for. The way this worked in the past is that a listing agent and the seller of the property would get together and they would determine how much of the total commissions they were going to use as an incentive to offer a buyer's agent if they brought a buyer to buy that property. So what the buyer's agent was going to make was determined by a third party in a room that they weren't invited into. Now that seemed to work pretty well for a long time. We work in a capitalist society, and if somebody can gain an advantage through strategic marketing or something like that, we've always allowed that. Moving forward, what we're going to do is we're separating these discussions. So the seller and the listing agent are now going to get together and they're going to determine what is the seller willing to pay that listing agent to market and expose this property to the market. And then somewhere else, a buyer and a buyer's agent are going to get together and they're going to discuss what am I going to pay that buyer's agent to help represent me, to help me make a better decision, to help me find the right properties, to save me time, money, and gas, and really help me to make a more educated and maybe a better decision for us moving forward. So those conversations are being handled separately. So I think that's really obviously good news for the industry as a whole and really for consumers moving forward. However, sellers are likely not going to get a pay raise because they're not paying the buyer agent commission. They're just not negotiating independent of the buyer's agent. Now, moving forward, what's going to happen is the buyer and the buyer's agent are going to go out and they're going to look at several properties together, hopefully, and they're going to find the buyer's favorite property, the one that matches their needs the most. And they're going to put together an offer that they're going to send to the listing agent who's representing the seller of the property. In that offer, most buyers who don't have a lot of extra cash to be able to pay their down payment, their closing costs, and their real estate agent fee are going to ask the seller as part of the purchase price to send a little bit back or to allocate some money at closing so that they have enough money to make sure that that representative gets paid. So instead of a seller determining ahead of time what that number is going to be, that agent that's working with the buyer, he may have showed them 100 properties. He may have been looking at homes for 6 months. Maybe he's got a client that is really looking for something specific and detailed, and it's been really hard to find. They had to do a lot of extra work to help the buyer to qualify to begin with, maybe help them to repair some credit, design a strategy to have some down payment money and everything else, and to go through all the different options to purchase. So maybe they put a lot of extra work in, And the seller who didn't know what went on over here was only offering maybe 1% in exchange. Well, this is the perfect home for the buyer, but that agent is going to be maybe underpaid based on all the work that they did. Or there's always been the scenario, and a lot of people believe this, that that agent didn't do anything. All they did was they got a couple of emails from the buyer who said, I want to go see this and this and this house. We went out. The first one was perfect. They spent 45 minutes together, and he makes all of this money. Now those negotiations are being handled separately. Again, I think that's a really good thing. But the likelihood that a seller, as part of the purchase price, is going to allocate some funds for the buyer's agent is still really high, guys. That's most likely to happen. Over the last couple of weeks, we've put some transactions together. One in particular where I had a seller who said, or I had a client that I was working with. We were also working with them to sell a home, and he said, hey, Rod, I've got some capital gains challenges with the sale of my property. What if I were able to pay you as part of the closing costs of my sale, your buyer agent commission, and you help me to go buy a property, but we don't put any of that into the contract. So I'll pay you ahead of time, and that way I can minimize my capital gains. For him, that was a perfect strategy, and it worked really well. I had another client that I worked with who said, hey, Rod, I don't have the funds to actually pay you what I feel like you're worth. So can we ask for that in the offer, which we also did, and we were able to get the seller to contribute. So the value of a home, what homes have been selling for recently, has included commissions and the price of the home. So people sometimes get confused. They're like, well, Rod, my home is worth $750,000. Well, it's maybe worth a little bit less than that. It's $750,000 if you include in the purchase price of the home the money to pay the listing agent and the buyer's agent. What are you actually paying for the property? Well, semantics again, but it might be a lot lower the number. So moving forward, I think the biggest challenge that we might run into, and I'm sure we'll figure out a solution, but it's appraisers, because if appraisers aren't privy on one transaction, 2 commissions were paid and that was included in the price. And on another transaction, only 1 commission was paid, and it was paid outside of the transaction. How do we really know what the home sold for, what to appraise it for? I think there's going to have to be a lot more communication. If you've read Stephen Covey's book, The Speed of Trust, you'll understand that, when there's been a level of distrust or there's been some violations of trust through transactions in the past, which I'm not arguing. I think that has been, unfortunately, the case at times. When there's been trust violated, things tend to slow down and they get a little bit more complicated and oftentimes a little bit more expensive. Moving forward, I think the appraisal process is going to slow down a little bit and get a little bit more complicated, as those guys are required to maybe have more conversations with both sides of the transactions to really get a picture of what happened in that sales price. Hopefully this is valuable information, guys. We'll continue to put out information to make sure that you have all of the information that you need to make the best decisions. If you're buying a home, if you're selling a home, if you're thinking about getting into real estate, we want to make sure that this is a great source. If you've gotten some value out of this, please hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure you don't miss any future episodes. And if you are thinking about buying or selling a home in the Salt Lake area, we would love to have a conversation with you and share with you what it is that we do to provide value for our clients on both sides of the ledger. Talk to you soon.